to be scores of them. Did the book start as a rock autobiography and then become something else?
Well, really, I mean, it's quite an interesting start of the book. Is that there's a sort of introduction, in fact, basically, I hadn't planned to do memoirs, but I was up in the attic of my studio one day, working at home, on a very slow, creative day, no ideas. In the attic, my father's trunk. I went upstairs one day, about 3 years ago, and opened it up. First one was my grandfather's trunk. I found his two memoirs about the life of an army doctor, published and finally received. So they're on the floor by my feet, and then the next trunk, my father's trunk, and I opened it up, and his memoirs, unpublished. Very funny, about his life in the Royal Navy. So I'm sitting there with 3 memoirs, and I'm sort of feeling the legacy I should address.
Right.
And I then made a photograph album of the pictures from the trunk, my father and myself on other pages. And for the first 25 years, it's the same people, the same football team, school teams. And then at 21, suddenly he's singing Bismarck, and I've got the long hair, double leg guitar, drugs and a rock band. So our lives turned left. And really, for me, the fascination of that generational change in the 60s, until the 60s, you plan to become your father, age 21, grew into your father. Then from the 60s onward, my era, anything but your father. So that's the change of the key.
The idea of you becoming a naval captain, or indeed becoming somebody in the city. The very idea of you with a bowler hats, rather piquant. But did you, in this manuscript of your father, how much of a revelation was it? Did it tell you things which startled you about the man you thought you knew?
Yeah, well, I never knew him very well because in many ways, in those days, my father's generation, my generation, we never really spoke. There was no common vocabulary. They'd come out of 2 world wars, they were sort of tired, shocked, and we suddenly appeared with pop music and long hair, so there was a hard gap between us in a sense. But his book was interesting. He never told me about any war stories until I read the memoirs. He didn't tell you any war stories until I read the memoirs. No, he wouldn't talk about the war. He never did in those days, really.
He's a very good writer. It's fantastic when he's describing what it's like being on the ship, among the ships that sank the Bismarck. It's fantastically dramatic.
Yeah, I liken his way of writing to David Niven.
Yes.
And Moon's Bullet, that kind of very dry humour.
Yes. He's a funny guy. The photographs show your father was obviously most at home in a uniform and had some very strict sense of how things were done. But it's rather hard to feel sympathetic towards him when he sent you to boarding school aged 7, if you please, and said, "Now, Michael, you're the son of a naval officer. Be strong, don't show your feelings, and you'll be all right." It's a bit chilling to say that to a 7-year-old. So how was boarding school, and did you ever forgive him for sending you there?
Yeah, you kind of did, because I think he thought that was the right thing to do, you know what I mean? It was what they did in those days,
Well, I know, but theoretically, yeah. But when you said you're a 7-year-old son standing in front of you.
The first 3 or 4 years there was just horrible, suddenly you're 7.5 and you're... Also, in those days, boarding school, you'd see your parents at half-term and one of the weekends, so you were away for almost 8 weeks, But I survived,
Is that all you say? This feeling your song lyrics right the way through all the years.
My prep school was better.
Yes. This is the
It
Leeds.
was friendly, up in Cheshire.
Right.
In the Wirral. That was a better sort of place. And it was just a funny time, because it's what parents do with their children those days.
Okay. The one thing which it's hard to, you said it's hard to emphasise how much it meant to you was listening to Piccadilly Pops on Sunday evenings. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, looking around the age here, it's a sort of good, we're all good ages, so I understand.
Genesis is.
When I try to tell my kids that, they can't really imagine, in the 60s, there was pop music on the radio for 2 hours a day, a week on a Sunday. My kids grew up with music in restaurants, elevators, hotels, airports, everywhere, So the idea that they could just hear it twice, 2 hours a week on Sunday.
It's a niche thing. Yeah, it's a niche thing for young kids. But this is these bands who were astonishing. Such a time, week after week after week, the amazing amount of talent coming out of there. Who did you particularly pick up on? So there were lots of novelty songs and lots of nonsense. Among the Kings and
singing non-meaning, that sort of sense.
Well, Should we say it? Should we tell the audience who your earliest rock idol was?
Yes.
It was surprised many people, I think.
Cliff Richards.
Richards.
Actually, his very first album, The Shadows, opened with a track called Move It, which actually, in the version of that song was fantastic. I mean, really strong, and the Shadows sound was really rock and aggressive, you know. So it was his career changed over the years. But if you imagine, you know, I was 11 or 12, and the Beatles came out, the Stones, the Who, the Small Faces. I mean, the kind of music in the charts, the Kinks. I mean, wonderful stuff. They're about 5, 7 years older than me, which I wish I might not see them now, but they still are. But it was a wonderful sort of leading point for us to get musically to sort of be led by.
Yes. And then your first concert was to go see Cliff and the Shadows in the Manchester Apollo. And there was that particular red Hofner guitar, I think, that caught your eye.
Yeah, Cliff was off the guitar.
You became a bit of a fetishist about guitars at that moment, I think. Did you?
I like the shape, but also there were no bands had keyboards in those days.
No bands and keyboards?
No, not really. But I remember.
Manfred Mann, I think.
A little bit later.
Sorry. Okay, we're in 1963, then, 64. Yeah. Okay, well, your first guitar was a cheap nylon stringed acoustic, and it seems only a few minutes before your first performance at school of Michael rowed the boat ashore that you formed a band at age 9. What? I mean, why? You weren't naturally extrovert or narcissistic.
No, actually, when I look back, I try to think, you know, because I'm not the most natural person on stage. Well, I enjoy it, I'm much more relaxed now, but suddenly I stood up on my own, and so I can't sing the notes here very well. Mike Rutherford, sure, fearlessly. I mean, when you're younger, you have no fear. And of course, by the time I got to play the guitar, being dropped on the floor, was out of tune, but I battled on.
Yeah.
And formed the first band called the Chesters.
Why the Chesters?
Because we lived in Liverpool. Sort of,
not
the Beatles had been done.
Right.
A town name by Liverpool.
Yeah.
In those days, anyone you were at school with who played an instrument, you kind of became friends. There weren't many guys who played guitars or drums, so you kind of became friends straight away.
But you weren't a sophisticated musician. You were just playing chords on the acoustic guitar. So
3 chords a year for the first 2 or 3 years, yeah. That's good enough. The Everly Brothers.
Good enough for punk, which we'll come to later on. Then you went to Charterhouse. You say your memories there are all of grey and black. What does it teach you, Charterhouse?
Well, survival for a start, really. I don't want to keep complaining about school because actually,
you want to say anything?
Survival. Those boarding schools then were very severe, and it wasn't much fun. I mean, nowadays they're much more open places. You know, like university, they have freedom and activities, but they were very repressive. And I caught that brunt of change. You know, all the old traditions were suddenly being challenged.
Right.
Like in the music of the band, you know. And so the guitar was seen as a symbol of the revolution. I'm a housemaster who banned from playing it forever. That's why I did it.
Your housemaster came in one day to discover Mike playing guitar along with Sgt. Pepper, and was so outraged by this image of rebellion, he banned you from playing the guitar again, which is
and probably beat me, yeah.
And beat you for that. There's a bit of throwing your hat in with the beat.
You think of health and safety now, you know.
This is what it's made you a rebel. It's not just teach you survival, it's teaching you to not buy any rules anymore. Is that right?
I think which is why me in the Navy never worked.
Yes, what saluting. So anyone with the meanest knowledge of Genesis knows that they all went to Charterhouse and they're all in the same class. Is that true? It's not. What is the truth exactly?
No, I think Tony might have been a year ahead. I can't remember.
Yes, and they're all in.
I mean, once you, like I said, at school, you know, none of us had joined school. Peter and Tony were hating school, so you had this bond. You meet in the afternoons and start playing instruments together.
But you didn't meet up for a while, did you? I mean, they're in a different house from you, which of course there's like social apartheid, isn't it? In a different house. So when did you come together? You've been there for a year.
Yeah, I mean, there were really 2 teams, myself and Ant Phillips. We were sort of writing duo.
Ant Phillips, your big friend and the person you most regretted leaving the band. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, so here we were at Shut sort of 14, 15, repressed, being bullied around, and then myself and Ed wrote songs a bit together, and Tony and Peter wrote songs together, and we kind of teamed up as a sort of writing team. And Ed, was I say in the book, Ed was probably the most driving force with Genesis for a long time. He was the one who was most committed to being in music and doing it. And I think without him, we never got off the ground, really. So when he left, which is later on, early days, that was probably the biggest shock of all, people leaving, I think.
And his strength was guitar playing or songwriting?
Guitar playing, songwriting, driving. I mean, he was obsessed and driving us all along, really. Because Pete was going to go to film school, maybe. Tony was at university. I was just falling out, really. So he was the one who really kind of drove the car for a bit there.
I think you all met up at the Easter holidays of 1967 to record a demo in a friend's house. Was that the first time you met Peter Gabriel and Tony Banks?
Well, I knew them, but not very well.
Yeah, exactly. The first time you actually
recorded together, worked together.
How did you get from not knowing them very well to doing a demo together?
Because if you've got this, well, I think Ange and I were going to do the songs anyway, and I was Tony to play keyboards, and Tony brought Peter on. No, Pete sang back then. Quite a long way. And it was, it seems funny now, but in those days, to get a chance to record 3 or 4 songs in a friend's house on a 2-track tape was quite special, actually.
2-track tape?
It's magic.
Can we just go back to your father? Oh, sorry, you've answered that already. I was going to say, did he express his feelings about the way the world is changing? Even to the extent of saying, you're a frightful boy and a disgusting hooligan, your hair is too long, and you're a disgrace to the family, or anything like that. Did he actually adopt that attitude of the elderly?
Never that bad. I do think that the naval people, having travelled the world a lot, are slightly more worldly than some of the other military sections, I think.
Sure.
And he probably couldn't understand what was going on. At school, I had short hair at school. But it wasn't until I left school that his sort of the long hair and rebelling started. You couldn't rebel at school, really.
Right.
Apart from being thrown out, which didn't help.
It's oh, quite no. I think your father rather stood up for you, didn't he? He came down to school and said, "What the hell is going on?
Yeah.
My son's being expelled for what? For what were you being expelled for?"
Whenever I say this, which is like nothing very much, people always think, "Oh, okay. What's the real story?" I had a housemaster who just didn't think I was very nice and thought I was a rebel and played guitar, and he sort of leaned on me all the time. So really, he was the one who actually made my life difficult, and he threw me out for nothing special. So my father came down and she stood up for me and said, "Hang on, finish his exams, then you'll leave."
Right.
Which I did.
What was the response? Did they fire him?
No, he carried on. I think they weren't convinced he was quite normal, but he was retirement, really.
So those days, it's rather sweet, the stories about you buying rock and roll equipment for your granny, with money your granny kindly said anything you want by doing, and your mother sounding rather like Miranda Hart's mother, saying everything's perfectly lovely, what a lovely tune, dear. She would say, she sounds discreet. Tell us about your mother.
She was,
yes, in this book.
Yes, in the book she's always quite sort of, she's quite sort of arty and dotty, and Dad's very straight and formal and organised, and Mum was just slightly wacky and full of life and a bit arty and a bit dotty. Loved the music, I bought my first guitar with her at Manchester. It's not a very cool scene going in
with
the music shop.
With your mum.
With Mum with a headscarf, tweed skirt. Down, you can't really be cool, can you? But she paid for it, so I went along with it.
Did she like music?
She did actually, yeah. When I was growing up, there were no songs in the house, there were no gramophone. It wasn't around until my sister bought one.
Oh, right, okay.
But she just liked sort of arty things, yeah.
Keith Richards' mother used to play lots of records, lots of old.
Yes, no, I never had that. There was no music in the house, which is sort of strange, really. But not unusual those days.
Maybe you imagine everybody's got a gramophone with some 78s on it.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Now, okay. What was it like discovering the Marquee Club? because you used to bunk off school, and quite, it was quite a dangerous thing to do, actually, bunking off school, going to the Marquee Club and coming over at 5:30 train in the morning, and risking being expelled every time you did that. But paints us the picture. Here's the Marquee in 66, 67.
Okay, so I'm at boarding school in Godalming, Charles, and so I sneak out about sort of 11:30. Got a motorbike parked up the road in the garage. Honda 50, not very cool.
Honda 50?
Yeah, it got me then. It got to Guildford Station, got the train up to London with a couple of schoolmates and Andy Dunkley, where is he now? And went to the Marquee Club. Now, Wall Street, Soho, was always quite a sort of safe area to me. The Marquee Club was very special in those days. The Cream, all those bands are sort of playing there, and I'd go and see the Cream. Noise was so loud when you first hear me, first live band, Get the train back at sort of 5 in the morning, sneak in. I think about it now, I feel quite nervous I did that, but actually, at the time you're making a point.
Yes, we're also soaking up kind of musical influences and thinking, I want to be so like him. What was it, Clapton? Clapton and the Blues. And did you see John Mayall?
Yeah, John Mayall with Eric too, playing along at the same time.
Wow.
At the Ramjam Club in Brixton. Where did that name come from?
Well, okay, I just wonder, maybe we'll do it later. When you did this demo with the guys in 67, somehow it got to the attention of Jonathan King, who by then had his rather awful record called Everyone's Gone to the Moon. I managed to rhyme it with spoon at some point, kind of factitiously. Jonathan King took you up and gave you the name of Genesis. I mean, did you like him? What did you make of him? What did you think of him? Why did he?
It didn't really matter. I mean, he was an old musician. Someone would have taken his car.
Yes.
And he gave him the chance to make an album. Now, in those days, to make a record, we were 16 years old in the summer holidays, for all of 3 days.
Right.
But to make it was quite an opportunity. We couldn't get in the studio in those days unless you were sort of stop recording stuff. So for us, it was quite a special time, actually. And in many ways, credited Jonathan. I think without him, we never got going. As for the name, we couldn't agree on the name. What's you like? Pete had Gabriel's Angels. And had something very bushy like Champagne Meadow. I forget my name. So in a sense, we were floundering with names. So in a way, Genesis was almost a relief, actually.
Why?
Well, we agreed on it.
No, where does it come from? Where does it come from? Jonathan King's kid. Apart from Jonathan King's head. Did he say why?
No.
Does it mean anything? Has it a meaning?
It's been used before, but
I grant you. You look at you and say, aha, it's the beginning of something new. Apparently not. Did you find him a bit wrong at all? Did you think he was
wrong with a bit of phrase? No, he was very flamboyant. And the funny thing in those days, I mean, it's strange, but you didn't talk about people with a gay lifestyle. It was weird. It was happening around you, but it was very discussed. A very repressive time, actually, strangely enough. And he was very open about not his behaviour, but the lifestyle he lived. I have to give him credit for getting us going, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. I just wonder how, when from Genesis to Revelation starts up, it was quite, it's even fading memory, it's quite folky, quite sort of bouncy.
We went,
How did you get from being impressed as hell by Clapton and John Mayall? How did you get from that love of the blues to doing a record like that?
I've no idea. I mean, because to be honest, when we asked about the band Genesis influencing on us, we always quote the Beatles and Tamla Motown, but it's hard to hear that in our songs, isn't it? But it's there somewhere, so in a sense, I suppose, we weren't really a band, we were sort of just feeling our way with that first album. And it was much more Peter and Tony, they were more the driving force of the first album than Ant and myself. We were more dressers in a sense. So in a sense, they're rather brilliant piano and voice, but it was just as a start.
Can I ask about Peter Gabriel's clothing? It just got mad. It starts off by us suggesting, right in 67, you head straight to Carnaby Street, be dolled up. But as it went on, in the next 4 or 5 years or so, I was having a look on YouTube at Peter Gabriel singing Watcher of the Skies and standing in this long rows, and his eyes are rimmed with kind of white sort of makeup, and looking so, what is the word? Pillock, which comes to mind, but I would just want to look at him and say, do you know what, Pete? I don't think so. Did he ever look at you and say, what do you think? Too much? Did you have a dialogue about his clothing?
You see, it's ethereal, time traveller or pillock, I like those choices. Funny enough, when I'm doing this book, I look back at all the pictures and they seem more shocking now than they did then, in a funny way. I don't quite know why. I think in a sense, first of all, Pete could never run past, otherwise we would have said no to everything. Right. He just appeared. I guess we were sort of just busy doing what we were doing. Playing the right notes, playing bass pedals, playing double keyboards. And there's Pete. Oh, he's wearing Batman's tonight. Oh, that's all right, yeah. He wasn't really such a sort of problem. Until the red dress, which wasn't a problem, it's a bit of a shock.
Yes. I guess it must be, your friend and colleague suddenly was approaching the microphone wearing a very large fox's head and a lovely red frock. Extraordinary. So your dad, just can we talk? Because we have so little time and far too many questions here, I'm afraid, but can we just generalise about things? I mean, your father and you both drew parallels at different times between the life of a band on the road and your father's Navy manoeuvres about what it required and so on, and especially about something called the hurrah cruises, which later on when the band was enormous, you say this is a hurrah cruise. Can you just tell us about the hurrah cruises?
Yeah, well, I think what happened after the career war that my father was very involved in, and after the World Wars, in a sense, a lot of the naval jobs would sort of go around Commonwealth parts of the world, 4 or 5 ships, put a show of power on display, the Empire, the Commonwealth, manoeuvres, meet and greet the locals, the local presidents, the government bodies, have drinks and sort of things. A kind of PR exercise. In a sense, not unlike what we do, travel the world, do a show, chat, do a promo, off we go to the next town.
Nice. Extraordinary. Connections. When you were travelling about, doing gigs for, an endless year, months and months of doing gigs. But when you were back in town, you seemed to do that. You never seemed, even when you were playing gigs at the Rainbow, you never seemed able to afford anything but a flat with a one shared bedroom. That comes up over and over again, and a series of horrible flat shares. Can you tell us who was the worst?
The Gay Tom.
Gay Tom, right.
I think you're so busy on the road, travelling, doing albums, recording, travelling the world. Life at home, where you do come drinking, is not very important. You just find a flat that works, there's a room, you share it. And I had Bruce Elliott, who's a sound engineer of the Clare Brothers in America, sharing a room with Gay Tom. And there's this old school, he was outrageous, platform shoes, green hair, and he actually ran out of money eventually, had to pay me cocaine, which is the deal. I see. But he was a character, and these characters, but in those days, we're talking about 72, 73, he was a very loud character in those court.
Fabulous gosh. And I think, let's talk about Phil Collins. When you were looking for a drummer, you'd been through 2 or 3 drummers by then. What were your first impressions of Phil Collins when you arrived? What happened? Where were you? Was there an audition?
It's a nice story. It's Peter Gabriel's house in Surrey, with his parents' house. It's a summer's day, and carpets rolled back, playing Gillingham, double doors were open, pools round the corner, And Phil arrives from Hounslow, and we say, well, the summer come first, you can have a swim. And of course, the story's quite well known. He learnt the parts of the early auditions while we were auditioning. But Phil's aura straight away was confident. Now, it's been said in various books that I wasn't sure about him, but I think I was. These stories sort of grow on the stick. He sat down with some kid, and he sort of knew before he even played the drums, he was confident and could do the job.
And did you say he learned the audition parts?
Well, he's sitting in the pool.
While he was in the pool.
There's 2 guys ahead of him.
Right.
Auditioning. So he's sitting along, he's learning the parts, working it out. So when you arrived, he just went bang, 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 how did that?
That's
But the best thing was, other drummers would sit down, well, listen, I'll fiddle around this hi-hat, I'll move this and I'll do all that, right? It's about 5 minutes, get comfortable.
Right.
Phil sits down, left-handed, swap the snare and hi-hat, off he goes. Very impressive.
Can I just say the way you describe it as a kind of refreshing breath of air, man who never was totally bothered about things, man who just saw things very directly. Would it be fair to say there's a certain air of the officer class of missing other ranks into the mess, just for a bit, just about how rough and ready he was, nothing was any trouble for a very easygoing chap. It does sound from women like your dad, just looking at somebody from a different caste, just sort of coming in and walloping the skins. Is that terrible?
It's a bit unfair, but in a sense, not different classes, but different lifestyles. The other thing was more important, Phil and Tony, myself and Peter, have been at school since the 40s. They had this sort of schoolboy link, which is still, you still argue the same way.
Yes.
You still on the same corners fighting your battles, whereas Phil was just a new person who had not clue what you're arguing about, really.
Right. And when Peter left, it was considered a disaster. Melody Maker said, that's it, Genesis is all over, it's toast and finished. For many fans and critics, he seemed to be the soul of the band. So was he, and why did you think he had to go?
Didn't have to go. I think Peter really, there are many reasons. He was the first one to have a child, have a family life, things outside work to worry about. And in a way, Tony and I were very unsupportive, I must admit that. I said, because we were sort of a bit selfish, doing the band, no time for having kids, 3 and a half kids, and it all changed. But the main thing, I think, is that Peter felt after the Lamb, maybe he'd done all the out the that time, it was time to move on for him, I think. And in a funny way, doing the book, you see it's inevitable in a sense, because actually there were 5 strong people in the band, and you couldn't contain all those 5 people. So when Peter left, although the world saw it as the end of the band, we saw it as a big change and a worry, but there was still a strong writing team there.
Yes, sure. But you talk about Peter writing lyrics, especially the line Lamb lies down on Broadway. That sounded a really epic business, a bit of songwriting. You're quite self-deprecating on your own lyrics. Can you tell us about writing songs for Genesis of which you're modestly proud? You're really proud of expressing emotions in the songs. Sorry.
Things lyrically, I suppose, probably Follow Me, which was a love song.
Bliss? Well, yeah, that's right.
About Angie, which I think was so simple, it really caught the moment. Turn On Again, was the lyric I did. Land of Confusion, my first and last protest song. I think of the lyric writer, when it works, when I get a song that works, it's good. If it doesn't, it's not. We'll have some of those.
Well, yes, but there's only lots of Genesis songs, the lyrics seem to become complete gibberish a lot of the time for some people. I remember Tony Blackburn on Radio 1, every time he played I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe, he would just go into this scornful kind of scoffing 5 minutes of, I'm a lawnmower. But you see, it was alone in Middle England, right? In the name of bleeding Jesus, I've been talking.
It's a bit like Pete's red dress, it provokes conversation.
Yes, right. And of course, there's one bit when you say, of course, you started off playing bass, and then played 12-string, and then played guitar, and so on, your massive double-neck guitars. But you say, the main drawback of playing just bass is that it gets so boring. And I thought this is astonishing. People like Sting and John Edwards, John Paul Jones, and indeed McCartney would be startled at you saying, do you really think it's so limited?
Well, all those guys play guitar as well.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because you can't just sit down. I love bass, and it's a real art. Yeah, but you can't just sit and play bass and go, can you? It's a bit boring,
Well, I thought you could just do more.
We play faster. You can't do much just thing. Bass is an instrument that accompanies things, so you can't play everything.
Right.
And I was actually a guitarist first, but Adam's a better player, so I went to bass. We've done both, but no, I enjoy bass very much, but it's a bit of I only play it really on record or live. I don't play it when I'm on here.
All right. In your typically modest way, you do say when Steve Hackett left Genesis, you were concerned about taking over lead duties. Well, for the non-musical among us, can you say what Steve could do that you felt you couldn't?
Steve was the lead player, had a sort of fluid way of playing, which I never could or would try and compete with. He's got a natural, unique sound and style. And I had to find a way to play lead.
Yeah.
To cut down to get it right. But you knew you couldn't sort of, you can't replace someone. You find something different. And I've always been more of a sort of chord player.
Yes.
Like a Pete Townsend, I write on chords more. So I knew I couldn't replace him, but he's a unique character, really.
You could do a Hackett solo, couldn't you?
Yeah, but not the same, not as fluid as he could, not initially.
Okay, right. Well, can we just mention, we bring up drugs. You seem to have there's this fantastic polite English way in which Mike takes any subject and sometimes says, well, it wasn't really like that, it wasn't too bad, it was okay. But I mean, you have tried several things. You always make it sound harmless and logical, like taking cocaine to keep you awake while driving the band home from gigs. It sounds perfectly sensible, like taking Anadin. Were you ever seriously harmed by cocaine or whatever you were taking, or ever addicted?
No, not really. I've always I found a balance in life being a Libra. But the point of the book really was that, it's become a social drug now, cocaine. And in our early days in the 70s, it was a sort of a physical drug. Kept you going, kept the crew going, kept me awake, driving the band most of the time.
Awake and talking, most people, but
yeah, no, it was. I think it was an experimental time too.
Yeah. Do you drop acid?
Yeah, a couple of times. The first time unintentionally, I had a spiked drink at the Marquee Club.
Oh my God! Right.
Which I was about 16 in my school trips actually, but in the holidays. And I had the most horrendous sort of bad trip at Richard Fair. I rode down this flat at home. Wow. And I remember crawling down the corridor to the toilet. It took about 7 days in my mind to get there. The other thing actually is worth mentioning is that, our touring schedule, organised by a manager who was here tonight, was always pretty demanding. You can't really be out of your head and not together to do a year like we used to tour, sort of thing. The bands who actually had these wild times didn't last that long, did we?
Yes, you sound like your father again.
Yeah, you
see, everybody does the bus.
It all makes sense, yeah.
We've done rock and roll and drugs, so let's do sex. Genesis was never on a par with Led Zeppelin, as far as I know, but you've had encounters with groupies without forgetting that we're in a church. Can you tell us about some?
I had an encounter with groupies. That's about all I'm going to say, really. I mean, it was a time of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was an exciting time.
Mike, one of them broke your finger. What were you doing at the time?
It was an after-show party in the hotel suite, someone's suite, and I've got no clothes or no trousers on, and I'm playing blind man's buff, one of those sort of silly games, and someone slams my door, my finger in the sliding bathroom door, in the bathroom, and it won't shut. So this guy backs it again, and it shuts. My finger cracks.
Oh my gosh, they're playing, well, they're all playing fingers, I know, but extraordinary. We almost get the audience in pretty soon, but we started a bit late, like 8:05, so we'll go to time longer. Can I ask about punk? 1977, it was everywhere, specifically designed to get rid of huge stadium bands like Yes and Genesis and Jethro Tull and the others. Did you despair about it?
No, this question is often asked, and do you know what? I think we weren't really here. And the year that punk went mad, we were on tour most of that year. You get these times on Genesis travel, and suddenly you've got a 6-month gap, you went to the country. And the big punk thing, we weren't really around very much that year, so it kind of, you came back and it was a bit like, oh, what's happened,
Where's the audience gone?
No, we didn't really carry on the same. We sort of didn't really affect us. It affected the press more than us, really.
Right, so Genesis gigs, weren't just wastelands of tumbleweed.
No, it really seemed sort of kind of passed us by. You asked Phil Turkey, they give you the same answers. You weren't really around for it.
It's often not be around for it. They're supposed to have taken the ground from under your feet and slides down.
I wish the punk thing actually had an interesting thing it did. bands were getting very complicated, in terms of production, sound, mixes. It was getting expensive to make an album and go on tour. And punk came back to 3 guitars and 2 amps, which I liked. Anyone could do it.
Yeah.
But the movement sort of rather went by the side of it and missed it really.
Right. About personnel, your first manager was Tony Stratton-Smith, and later your manager is now Tony Smith. How are the two Smiths as managers contrasting you? And was Tony Smith, who's a large and imposing chap with a beard, was he a manager in the mould of Peter Grant, Led Zeppelin? And what makes a good manager?
Which Tony? Tony Stratton-Smith was a wonderful star. He's with us no more.
Yep.
And Tony Smith's here tonight, so I'm going to temper carefully.
Absolutely.
Tony Stratton was a wonderful, actually, Prism Records, a wonderful bon viveur who gave the band a great chance. Full of albums to sort of learn our way, apprenticeship, But day to day was not a business guy. And we were on tour with Genesis sort of 71 or 2, I think, and it was disorganised and chaos. And Tony Smith was our promoter. He'd been promoted for many bands for years in the UK, and we asked him to be our manager. And he had a very good business brain, and he sort of wasn't sure about this change from promoting to managing. So finally we persuaded him to do it. And straight away Peter Gabriel left. So I'm sure he was thinking, oh God.
As a direct result.
But it turned out really good.
Yeah. It's that story about him going up a mountain retreat to be the kind of terrifying boss of...
We did a very early tour in South America, before Queen, in Brazil. And Tony went first to organise the payment, money up front and the contract. They wouldn't pay, they wouldn't insure the gear, He was taken one day by the head guy of the promoters up to the mountains with the 2 bodyguards in a limousine, smaller roads off the road to a villa in the hills.
Scary.
Thinking. And he met the head of Globo, who runs the Brazilian newspapers, and the guy from Chicago. He told me, it's a good deal.
Wonderful, gosh. Speaking of bad experiences, readers of this book will feel a lot of worry for your wife Angie. She went through some shocking experiences with the band and travelling, especially travelling on the way to meet the band and coming from meeting the band. The overnight bag story, could you just tell us about that? Or the ice cream van story?
We were, those days you were touring around the world without mobile phones, so you couldn't sort of communicate day to day at all. So I was rehearsing in Dallas for a Genesis tour in the 80s, and asked her to come out for the weekend just to sort of come and see me. So she came out, had no mobile phones, no address, someone come to the airport to pick her up. She gave me a small sort of hand baggage, which has got one of my old joints from a trip to Jamaica 2 years previous, one of those big ones in Jamaica Inn. Brilliant. And of course, in those days, it was Reagan days. Nancy Reagan says no St. George, so she gets busted at the airport. So they say to Angie, where are you staying? She said, no. Who's picking me up? She said, no. Why are you here? I'll tour the rock band. So it's all getting very serious. They finally let her through. Of course, no one's there because we thought she'd missed the plane. So that was, anyway, she stayed and survived that. It's all a good adventure,
yeah. So, rushing on a bit, Michael and the Mechanics started in 1984. They weren't actually supposed to be a band, were they? They were just you finding some session people, some singers.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about how that started out?
Well, like most things, luck, it's sort of, I said to the publishers, I want to try some different songwriters. First to Krishna and Olivia Robinson. I said, can I find a couple of different singers? First who was Paul Carrick and Paul Young. Can you find me a name? So he said, Mike Rutherford. So things just sort of bumbled into place, which I like. And he made the album with no sort of plan to be a band. The thought that after Peter Gabriel's success in films, one more would do well was quite unusual, really, unthought of, but it's kind of clicked and worked.
Yes. It was terrific. I mean, did you think that in 1986, Peter Gabriel's Soul was a #1 hit, and Phil Collins' No Jacket Required was a huge hit. And did you think, I should have gone solo properly rather than songs.
Well, to go solo,
you wrote two solo,
you need a good voice.
Sorry.
You need a good voice to go solo.
Ah,
That's the problem.
exactly. But you did sing on Small Creeks Day, didn't you?
No, I sang on the next one.
Oh, sorry.
Acting very strange.
Right.
Which is why I called Michael Mechanics, actually.
But Michael Mechanics did so well, and it's just something coming towards the end. The Living Years, which this book is named after, that song everyone thought you wrote it, because it seemed about you and your father, but of course it's by B.A. Robertson, about his dad. B.A. Robertson wrote Bang Bang, The Mighty Ford, and that charming song. There's a very touching finale in the book when you reflect on your parents' lives and how you didn't communicate more, and ask how they were doing, and talk to them like they were friends. I'm not sure many children do that, but have you stopped telling yourself off about it now? Have you come to terms with the fact that you didn't?
I think the book has helped. I mean,
yes.
In the book, as the interesting part, the end is sort of after Dad dies, 86, BA and I do the Living Years. It's sort of we kind of wrap up and do a sort of appraising version of what's happened since in a chapter. But really, I think sort of looking back that 80s bubble when it was just we were king of the world, you know, in our snobbish bubble of success, joy in the world. Those last sort of 7 years of my father's life, I didn't see him very much. I do feel responsible for that. But I think the book has, in a way, helped me, because in the book, my dad's passages are there. It's helping. So seeing my dad's stories alongside mine is a great feeling for me to see that.
Yeah, and the photographs as well. As we go through the photographs, it's here's Rutherford Senior, kind of scanning the sky from aircraft in the middle of the war. And there's Mike Junior below, doing the same kind of gesture, looking for something else on the rock and roll horizon. And they're charming how they move along in a kind of tandem. You never told him you loved him, but would he have been keen on to hear his son tell him he loved him?
No, I mean, no one did in those days.
How close did he come to telling you he loved you? Do you think that way?
No, we didn't have a kind of conversation. You know, I mean, I'm not, there's no blame attached to either of us. Just sort of, you couldn't talk those in that way. Although his last few years, you probably could have spoken a bit more like that.
Yes.
But I was just busy chasing my career, so that's not my regret.
How close did he come in a gesture, following what he wrote in the book about you?
Well, of course, his book finished when I was 5, so his book finished when I was 5, so there wasn't enough of that, really.
Sorry. Right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, there's 10 or 12 minutes left. Could be there's a roving microphone if you'd like to ask the great man some questions. Yes, gentleman there in the second row, and there's a lady over here, if you give not the microphone, just afterwards. Go, sir.
Hi, Mike. Wondered what you thought about Steve Hackett doing the Genesis album, Revisited 1 and 2, and whether you would consider guesting to play on a track or two on his tour, or indeed if he does another version.
I don't really know. I haven't really heard the album. Not heard it, I'm around here yet. It's obviously Steve's choice, you know. There's so many sort of tribute bands playing Genesis songs. Obviously, he isn't the best by a long way, not because he was in the band. And he stays true to that era of his time. Probably not. I sort of find it a bit hard going back. I mean, I've enjoyed hearing the old stuff doing this book. I appreciate it actually, a bit more in a sense, but I sort of feel that was then.
Right. Okay. Well, instead, could you do the Lamb again, please?
All right.
Yes,
fair enough. You don't ask.
Good evening.
Where did you get the idea for Small Creeps Day? What were your influences for that? Because it's a great album.
Thank
very,
you.
Very much overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, I heard of it when I was doing this project. I read a book. I've forgotten the book. It's not the title, I can't remember what the title must have been, but it was just the author about a guy who worked in a factory, a very dull job, and it's all about going through various sections of the factory, kind of similar to life in a sense, but it was very good. And I must admit, I thought, in a way, looking back, it worked quite well.
Do you have a preference between Genesis and Mike and the Mechanics?
No, in a way, it's a bit like, people say choose. You don't have to, because they're so different. You know, unlike most bands, we did solo stuff for the variety rather than the satisfaction. You know? And I'm sure that the sort of stuff, Phil's stuff, Tony's and me, the mechanics, that variety helped us keep going. You know, you enjoyed the change, different drummers, writers, then you reformed for another one, you regroup another album, and you appreciated what you had in a sense.
Thank you.
Variety.
So,
Hi Mike, I'm Joey, also from Surrey. Big Genesis fan. I was too young to go to Earl's Court in '92, I wasn't allowed. No, but I managed to go in 2007. I went to Rome, it's very cool, and Twickenham as well, so it's cool. My question is about the future of the music business. Obviously you get great success with Michael Mechanics and Genesis. As a musician myself, I've had to diversify and create like an events company and create other work. As new songwriters and new artists come now into this business and the way it's changed, do you see it's a case of you have to have lots of irons in the fire to be able to survive and try and make a living as a musician?
Yeah, you probably do it, but you're right actually. You know, I have to remind people that there weren't that many bands who started out. You know, as long as you were reasonably okay, you can make a living and survive for a few years to learn your craft and build something or not. Now it's tough. I mean, you know, record sales reduced the amount of again with the online stuff. It is tough. I think you have to be inventive. I mean, on the other hand, because the online stuff is there, you can find a connection if it's going to work. But it is hard in a sense. I mean, I'm sure if we started now, we'd find it hard because that sort of early touring circuit in the UK at universities and small clubs in the back of pubs and stuff doesn't exist anymore. There are one or two, but so few left. I think it's tough about it. Yeah. I'm glad I have my chance to answer.
I was also banned by my housemaster as well for playing piano, so yeah.
Okay, you're on.
that's enough.
Thanks. Hi, Mike. I first want to say thanks. I've been following you since my big sister bought Seconds Out in 1977, and we still play that album a lot in our house. I was going to ask you about your mum and dad coming to gigs, Genesis gigs. My parents, they're very supportive of me in everything I do. The idea of them coming to a gig and handling the volume and just not walking out immediately. And I just wonder how your parents found it, because I know they came to a lot of the concerts.
Well, my dad had a small trick. My dad was a naval officer in the gunnery world. So when you do gunnery exercises, earplugs went in. So he came to, I remember the story, he came to Wembley Empire Pool to see us. He's in a sort of smart suit. Mum's in a fur coat, they're sitting down, you know, they explain there's a band playing tonight, and before we start, in go the earplugs. That's how we survived. And then within seconds, it's in the book, there's Peter Gabriel calling that inflatable phallic penis coming toward Dad in row 15, you know, and I was thinking, oh my God. But, I guess, but also seeing your parents being there, enjoying seeing you being appreciated must have been easy, but he wore earplugs all the time.
Hi, Mike. Hi. I once met Paul Carrick just after Phil had left the band, and I said to him, how about it? Would you be the next singer in Genesis? And he said, his words were, they never asked me. And I just thought, bearing in mind your connections from these days, do you think he might have been a better fit than Ray Wilson?
Actually, he said the same joke to me, actually. I think, funny enough, actually, his name came up, we thought about it. And I guess because he was doing the mechanics, it would have been weird. He wasn't the right guy anyway, probably, because his stage presence wasn't quite what needed with Genesis. I mean, the most wonderful voice. And I think because he was in the mechanics, it would have been wrong to then tag that to Genesis. It couldn't really be both, I think. But no, we didn't ask him.
Passengers there?
There's sort of the 70s period and the 80s period in Genesis, and you can see the
Yes, yeah.
And so, but there's also the transitional period. Which albums would you say represent that period? What were the transitional albums, and why were they key in sort of changing the Genesis sound from the 70s to the 80s?
I would say, I mean, I'm going to give you 3 or 4 here, because in my mind, you know, Foxtrot with Summer's Ready was a key moment. That's our best long song. And then I think Trick of the Tail, when we had the change, unasked for, but had to deal with it. When Peter left, so you find a new sound, really, which you can't not do because there are new people in a funny way, Abacab wasn't the best album, but it was a sort of way of changing your sound for the next few albums. Those are the key ones, really, in terms of the transitional moments.
Just one more quick thing. Tony Banks and Steve Hackett have both said at various times that Wind and Weather is one of their favourites. Does that hold a special place for you as well?
No, in fact, that album I found was a little too feminine for me, is how I describe it. And Tony Banks sort of raises his eyebrow when I say that, but it's more a Tony type album, actually, yeah. Hence, probably more his favourite album than mine.
Yes, sorry, there's a gentleman there. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Then you, sir. Right.
Sorry, yeah.
Age. The mic is the mic off.
Hello.
Gentleman at the back first.
You go first, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Biggest Genesis fan in the world. I've travelled to America to follow you everywhere. I sat outside Drury Lane for 3 nights in 1980. I have so many questions, but just one, going back to Phil's audition at Cobham. Were you really wearing a smoking jacket and slippers for this audition?
It's funny how these stories sort of grow and become legend. No, I might have been wearing a dressing gown. It was a very relaxed session. It's not a smoking jacket, but it kind of goes in the story now, you know.
Smoking jacket and a cummerbund. Yes, it's gentleman in the red jumper.
You're not wishing to pull rank, Mike. I know Whale Island. My father worked at Whale Island. Like a lot of people here, I have something else in common with you. Like you, I like your music. And also my father, like yours, is now out of physical reach. Now I've got regrets for the mid-70s when I interviewed Genesis at Brighton. And of course I only spoke to Peter because at that time Peter seemed to be Genesis and his backing group. Never realising then the massive contributions that each of you made into the whole, so that was my sadness. But I just want to raise something about the living years. Every year we, like so many people, celebrate Father's Day and Mother's Day, and it seems to me a card, in hindsight, just is never enough. And I think you're well placed, and I challenge you to upgrade that way of celebrating fathers and mothers to hug a Father Day and hug a Mother's Day. Don't just send a card, because when it's too late, cards are no good. You wish you'd given more hugs.
Well, absolutely. It's not a question, but I mean, I thoroughly, very nice point. Thank you. Nicely put.
Lovely stuff. Yes. Sorry, the gentleman there is going crazy. There's a competition with the number one Genesis fan in the building.
Good evening, Michael.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming. My question is, having seen been part of the great success of Genesis through the Gabriel period, restarting it again with Phil Collins and doing all that, and having the fabulous success with Mike and the Mechanics, I want to bring this sort of thing right up to date now, where you're obviously touring the Mike and Mechanics now with new singers. And how much are you sort of really into that and really want to make that a great success like you've done in the past? So are you really committed to that?
Yeah, I kind of am. I mean, I think the thing is that the Mechanics never toured very much. Because basically we had a Genesis album for a year or half a year, world tour for a year, Mechanics album. There wasn't much time left to tour the Mechanics. I did a few shows, but not many. And so I kind of had a crack at it again, restarted it sort of 3 years ago. And I realised how popular, how well these songs work live. The Mechanics songs.
It's great new album with,
yeah,
with the live bits.
Yeah, I mean they're great live songs. I've kind of forgotten that. And so playing with people like Andrew Roachford, who's a great player and singer, and Tim Howe and Gary Wallace, it's such a great band. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm kind of
building. Plans to continue it?
Yeah, I plan to. I mean, we're going to tour quite soon, next month. Play Hammersmith here, I think, and we're going to play the year after. It's a bit like I've gone back to how I was 45 years ago, starting to build something at my age, which is slightly worrying.
With all the success you've had.
And I'm playing, the first tour, I'm thinking I'm playing Bristol, Colston Hall. 43 years later, is this okay? Is no one going to say to me, that's enough, but it's such fun with these guys that I'm going to carry it on, yeah.
Is everyone in the middle there?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me all right? Hi, Mike.
Yeah, Mike.
I'm standing up.
Okay.
I hope you are into it, because I'm looking forward to seeing you on the 19th at Chatham, next month, which we're really looking forward to. What I'm interested in is, obviously in the news with Phil Collins coming out and saying he might do something else, and he's had his illness, and Peter, which we done saw earlier in the year. What's your relationship with these guys now? Because we see you, I think, as one. You know, you are for us almost our family. You know, like the gentleman over there, 76. When I bought your Trick of the Tail for £1 from a friend of mine in a music lesson, when I first heard Robbery Assault and Battery, I was completely, as a 13-year-old, sent into this world of mad visions and music. So what's the relationship like with the other guys now?
Well, I've always said in interviews in the book, and I'm really proud we're still good friends. You know, we don't see each other all the time, it's great news that Phil wants to come and do some music work again, whatever it is. Some writing maybe with Adele, I'm hearing stuff in the press, stuff like that. You know, I think it's great, and maybe do some shows again. There were no plans for Genesis, but I've always said never say never, and look what happened in 2007. But nothing's planned, but I think it's great news that Phil is doing stuff again. There's too much music in him to not do it. I think retiring, he found, didn't really work for him, so who knows?
Thank you, Mike. You've given us a lot of pleasure. Thank you.
Last couple of questions. One of
Do you have a question?
Mike, have you got a favourite Genesis album when you look back?
I've got a couple, and in fact doing the books helped me review everything actually. Foxtrot, some of the radio sounds pretty good to this day, and I think the album called Genesis with that dodgy yellow cover, and those dodgy bricks, kids bricks, the first song, you know, Mama, that's pretty strong actually, and I'd say that's pretty good.
Hi Mike, hi. After the Gabriel era, I think I heard you say, or somebody said that there was a amount of debt that Genesis had, but when you embarked on, shall we say, the new form of Gen, if you like to say, new form of Gen, was there one eye on the red numbers in the bank account that made you more commercially aware, or did that give you any impetus to change direction?
No, in fact, the way debt works for record labels is that it's quite good in a sense. We earned probably £500,000, but if it broke up the next day, the debt goes away. It's only against future earnings. And so, no, I mean, yeah, isn't it funny how, you know, Peter left the band and he sort of became different musically. Sure. We all kind of did sort of different songs. You can't stay the same, although I appreciate the early stuff. You know, when change happens with players, members of the band, you change musically, you know. And I always think, you know, we sort of get this thing that we don't stop doing long songs. It was the very end of doing long songs, but the MTV era, the singles that were successful overshadowed on albums, so you heard the singles more than the long songs. But as you know, if everything's live, the long songs is popular with the short songs.
just over there, and that'll be almost it.
Just sort of bringing it bang up to date, I was just wondering how you're finding the book promotion stuff compared to album promotion stuff. Is it really different? And would you be writing some more prose as well in the future?
Would I be what?
Writing some more prose, perhaps?
No idea at all. But no, funny enough, it's kind of more fun, because I mean, I've been doing albums for years, you know, and you're saying the new songs are this, you know. Talking about the book is, for me, more fun, because, you know, you get asked questions about your father and stuff like that. Because my dad's in this book, it makes this whole project more fun to do, in a sense.
Good, I think we'll have to leave it there, because it's nearly 15:15. Ladies and gentlemen, I do hope you get to read this book. It is full of, it's very witty, it's very dryly witty, it's actually, you know, it's a funny book, it's very tender about family and father. Their relationship. It's also full of fantastic little details. I was going to say, is it true that Mike and the Mechanics, Mike wants to call the band Not Now Bernard? Not Now Bernard. Yeah. One of the singers, one of the songwriters he lined up was had been a film actor who co-starred in Confessions of a Plumber's Mate. It's just full of little nuggets of details. And about Mike's criminal record, which is just shyly proffers at the remix. And I'll tell you about the time the band owned a brothel, but just sort of subtly introduced it to the conversation. Anyway, Mike is not doing signed teasers, yeah. Mike is going to signing books, he's already pre-signed on stack of them, and I think I'm right in saying at the back through the glass doors. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your intelligent questions. The whole place in this chilly, rather echoey chapel is full of love for Genesis, I can feel it. And a huge thank you to Mike Rutherford.